Namaste. So for those of you who have been following this channel for a while, it should come as no surprise that, in my view, the Vedanta and the Vedic tradition and Buddha's teaching are actually equivalent. They are different views of the same subject in different languages. That's all. It's like I can say in English, tomorrow. Or I can say in French, aujourd'hui. But it means the same thing. So similarly, I can say in the Vedic language, Brahman. Or I can say in the Buddha's language, Shunyata. Actually, it's the same thing. Emptiness, nothingness, is the same thing as Brahman. What's the proof? Well, let's look at the definitions. Definition of Brahman is given in the Upanishads and in Vedanta Sutra. And there it is said that Brahman is supreme, beginningless and endless, qualityless, attributeless, changeless, timeless. Starting to sound familiar? Without boundaries. See? Without an object. It's completely subjective. And on. We can go on and on about this. Like Nyanananda used to say. People say, I go on and on and on and on and on. He was so funny. He was a really, really wonderful being. But his contemporaries didn't appreciate him because he wasn't orthodox. He didn't follow the script. He thought for himself, and he viewed things for himself. So in the same way, I'm certainly not going to get support from the Orthodox Buddhists, and neither I'm going to get support from the Orthodox Vedantists, because they all want to have a separate sectarian cult. But actually, the Shastras, the scriptures, the sutras don't support that. If you want support for sectarianism, you have to look to the later writings, the post-Buddhist writings, the post-Vedanta writings. Now, the Vedic people try to make a case that the later writings are actually older. But philologists, the people who study language, can understand very easily that the style of Sanskrit and even the notation of the Sanskrit used in the later works, the later Puranas such as the Bhagavad Purana, are much more modern, much more recent than the original four Vedas, Upanishads. Even Vedanta Sutra is relatively modern. The style of Vedanta Sutra was in fashion about 1500 to 2000 years ago, contemporary with Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya did a wonderful job of clearing away a lot of the encrustation of useless sectarian writings around the Vedanta. And what is the subject matter of the Vedanta? The Upanishads. So the Upanishads are really the gold standard of the Vedic teaching. And in the same way, the Buddha Suttas are the gold standard of the Buddhist tradition, the authentic Buddhist tradition, the practitioners' tradition, not the scholars. The scholars like to make all kinds of crazy inferences. You know, like we were talking about name and form, and I didn't get to discuss this point, but in the commentaries, the definition of nama, name, has something to do with bending. It's like, what? Nama simply means names. The symbols, the language that we construct around our intention, attention, contact, feelings, and perception. So because language is a human-made thing, scriptures are also human-made. Don't let anybody tell you that these scriptures are, you know, from some divine source in some other world and some eternal heaven and all of this. Well, there may be some heavenly realms. Certainly there are. But they are also constructed just like this earthly realm. They are also sankata is the word. Means constructed thing, a made thing. Something that has a beginning. And because of that, it also has an end. So these cannot be the supreme destination. Param gatam. These cannot be the supreme origin. Only something that is changeless, timeless. You see? And the only things like that in the whole literature of the world are Brahman and the void, emptiness. Now, people are afraid of this negative language. They like to dress Brahman up in the clothing of God, the supreme, the creator, the controller. But all of those things are secondary or even tertiary. You see, Brahman, or the void, is the necessary precondition for being and becoming. Without a space, without awareness, you can't have phenomena. Otherwise, it's the tree falling in the forest paradox. You know, if there's a world and there's nobody to see it, does it really exist? And Brahman is just completely wrapped up in itself. It has no objective awareness, has only subjective awareness. So just like emptiness, Buddha and sometimes Shiva instruct us to meditate on emptiness and meditate on the void. So there you have the void, right? But who is aware of the void? Or what is aware of the void? Who is meditating on the void? Not a person. That's impossible. Because emptiness is like the universal solvent. Anything that you put into it simply gets dissolved and lost. This whole material universe with uncountable clusters of galaxies, and all this other stuff can just get lost in one little corner of emptiness. The people are afraid of that. They're afraid of getting lost. But if you look at emptiness from the other side, from the side of being trapped in samsara and suffering in the material world, it starts to look like the ultimate refuge. It starts to look like liberation, like freedom, ultimate freedom from suffering, from being and becoming, from karma, cause and effect, from being forced to take birth after birth after birth, and so on. So really emptiness is our friend. Okay, if you want to dress up emptiness as Brahman or even as Shiva, that's fine. But realize that the Vedic tradition and the Buddha's tradition are complementary views, positivist and negativist views of the same thing, the same nameless, formless, unmanifest, uncreated, incomprehensible, absolute being. Or actually, being and non-being are irrelevant. When we get to this level, see, this is Ajata. This is Ājñā-cakra. Both the Buddha Suttas and the Vedanta come from the top down. Advaita Vedanta comes from the Ajata level. And then it expands into the Vivartha-vāda level as meditation. Ultimately, meditation on the void. And then there's a whole infrastructure of gods and goddesses that's built on top of that. And that's Vishishtadvaita-vāda. And finally, there's the dualistic mundane religions, the deity worship and the puja and all the rituals and prayers and stuff of Dvaita-vāda. So you see, spiritual life comes from the top down, not from the bottom up. Yes, we have to climb that ladder step by step to reach the higher stages. But Buddha's original teaching is only Vivartha-vāda and Ajata-vāda. It has nothing to do with duality whatsoever. It's based on emptiness and timelessness from the beginning. It's only later that pujas and worship and prayers and all this stuff were added to the Buddha's teaching to create Buddhism, which is, of course, a mass religion. And anything for the mass is going to be diluted. It's going to be perverted from the original. It's got to be, because the masses can't understand the original. They can't comprehend emptiness. They're afraid of emptiness. As we've seen here on this channel, whenever we discuss topics related with emptiness, the views fall way, way down. What to do? People aren't ready to hear it yet. So from now on, I think what I'm going to do is, it's been kind of implicit. If you look back on the previous videos, you'll see that they alternate kind of between the Buddhist view and the Vedic view. So from this point, I think we're going to make that more explicit. That we can see all the major points of Buddha's teaching also confirmed in the Vedic teaching, and especially the teachings of the sages, like Ramana Maharshi and so on, the realized sages, because they know everything manifested is illusion. That's clear. Shankaracharya, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, that Brahman is truth, the world is an illusion. So from this point now, we want to bring out this view that Buddha's teaching and the Vedic teaching are not antagonistic whatsoever. Now, the religions based on them, Hinduism and Buddhism, they may disagree. That's because they're taking positions. But the Buddha says, a position is something the Tathagata has done away with. Rather, he follows the middle way, which is from ignorance as condition, sankhara arise. From sankhara arise consciousness, and so on. the middle path. Paticca samuppada. Dependent arising. Dependent arising is also taught in the Vedas, not so explicitly and not under the same name. Rather, it's given a dress of gods and goddesses. And there's a creator and a creation and so on like that. This is so that people can feel comfortable to approach the absolute, to approach the truth gently, step by step. But there comes a time on the path, whichever way you approach, where you have to face emptiness, because emptiness is the ultimate truth. Om Tat Sat. Buddha Saranai.